Qui fait la chasse pour sa place, lui, walking around losing his place.
That's something.
So I try to protect you there, but you know, only so far.
Yeah.
That's it.
Just mine.
Okay.
No, they've got me over there.
Just mine.
Okay. No.
Prepare that list. I think this is the wrong pile, but see if there's anybody else. Mine wanted to have one from
Just gotta be heavy.
He's gonna give you our RFP. Yes, I got it.
I like it.
Karen.
Hey, Mike. Are you in this list somewhere?
I'm not either. This is not.
Sure.
I'm not.
Yeah, Mark's not here. I'm Mark today.
And then you'll need another one. Liz, I'm ready.
Well, let's stick that in a stack of unusable good moments.
But the show's not my number. It's my because she shows up. Get your name on there.
You may.
We sorted it out.
I saw one for you.
It's a mystery.
And you had top billing too, I must say. So, you know,
Alphabetical order.
yeah, well, go with it. Just go with it.
So we have,
I know you bitten somebody this week. You're
there
good.
you are. We crossed in the wind and I think we better put this tag now. Is Grant coming? Grant, there's Grant.
I think he's here.
I swear I put your tag over
You
there.
did.
You did.
Still an empty chair, so.
Exactly. So,
Everyone had a chance to get a little fresh air, except some of our panelists that are kind enough to do back-to-backs. So for those of you that are here for the first of these panels on our affordable housing summit, welcome. How many of you are out-of-town guests to the summit, to give you a sense of the audience? Well, welcome. We've seemed to have managed to get the weather to cooperate. Do enjoy our wonderful city while you're here. Lots going on. So I'm Greg Powell. I chair the Urban Land Institute here in Charlottesville. And our mission is to focus on responsible land use. And we're an educational institution, and we do a lot of this sort of thing, convening dialogue on issues of critical importance to the communities in which we are also residents. If you didn't catch the first two, you missed two great panels on. We had guests, one of whom is back with us, Michelle from Boer, and we had Park City in Pasadena talk about policies that they had put in place and very successfully implemented. Talk about lots of tools. We were taking copious notes. Speaking of copious notes, we are live streaming this and recording it. For many reasons, some of the people that this whole event was designed to help inform are not here, but they may be there, I hope. And these are available on TJPDC's website. They will be stored there, each of the 6 events. Tomorrow we start with another keynote where we have 3 developers, each talking about successful affordable housing developments that were delivered in very different ways. I think one of the things that's certainly becoming evident here is that this is a highly partnering environment that's required to tackle a problem as large as this. So we're going to talk about 3 different development structures that have been successful in delivering great budgets. Some of them have ULI awards as a result. Then we have, after lunch, we talk about design of the home itself, design of the community, and a discussion of cost. Because the reality is that you can't build affordably without lots of other creative tools. And then we end the day with where we should have started. Stacy's left for today. We're going to talk about needs assessment. The city is just finalizing a draft of the needs assessment as the first step in our city's new housing policy process. And so that'll be the final panel of the day. Then on Saturday morning, we're having an action forum right here, 8:30 to 10:30, sorry for the time, that takes lessons learned and applies them to how we can move housing forward here on a regional basis. We're going to start that session with a summary of the 6 panels, either the moderators or someone else from the panel, so if we can get all 6 to give a little background for those that haven't heard them all. Then we're going to ask the various key stakeholders what's next. What's next for Piedmont Housing? They're going to issue their master plan next month. What's next? Grant, you're going to issue an RFP. And then we're going to say, what have we heard? How can we create more tools to help solve the problem? So we invite all of you to attend that on Saturday morning as well. So I thank Charlene. Charlene has had a busy day job this week.
Just this week?
Just this week. I'm myopic. I've been so focused on these 3 days. And thank all of you panelists. I don't know whether you're just going to introduce them as you call on them or what, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Charlene, and introduce your fabulous panel. And thank you for participating in this.
And just as a point of clarification, the Saturday event, is it here or at City Space?
Right here. No, it's right here.
It's here?
Yeah.
Okay, because I thought it was at City Space.
No, City Space was otherwise taken by something.
All right, and
Some other conflict.
what time are we supposed to be down here? I don't want to keep these folks too.
4:45.
4:45.
You get an hour and 5.
All right, sounds good. Welcome. Thank you for sticking around if you were here for the last session, and thank you for being here if this is your first one. My name is Charlene Green. I am the manager for the Office of Human Rights for the City of Charlottesville. And I'm your moderator for this session on looking at community outreach as it pertains to affordable housing. And so just to reiterate what Greg said earlier about folks who may not be here watching, I want to be clear about the elephant in the room, that we don't have what I assume to be a lot of residents in Charlottesville who are looking for affordable housing here to hear directly from some of them. And so as we think about our questions and our responses to some of the questions that I might have, keep in mind that some of the people this conversation directly impacts may not be in this room right now. With that said, I want to open up with just some consideration about guidelines for discussion. In case things get just a little hot, just by the very nature of my job, sometimes things get hot with the kinds of conversations I tend to facilitate and moderate. And so we want this to be as respectful as possible. The intent is not to walk out of the room singing "We Are the World," holding hands and kumbaya. This is to talk about your opinions and what you think are issues related to community outreach and affordable housing. And so don't feel offended if I should cut you off or maybe redirect your question or ask you to clarify your question in the process. So I'm going to start on this end with Michelle, and then I'll have all of the panelists introduce themselves and to make some sort of comment about how affordable housing or community outreach affects their responsibilities with affordable housing. So, Michelle.
Hello, I'm Michelle Allen, and I'm with the City of Boulder, Colorado. I'm the Inclusionary Housing Program Manager. And in a nutshell, inclusionary housing is a program whereby a certain amount of all new residential development needs to be set aside as permanently affordable. There are options for meeting that requirement, but it is a requirement in Boulder to get a building permit. Everybody does it. And people ask me, can I get out of it? And I say, yeah, there's like benefit taxes and inclusionary housing. There's no way out. If you want to build here. As far as community outreach, it's pretty key to what we do. But one of the cornerstones of inclusionary housing is because the community discussion happens when the program's put in place. We don't have a discussion about every project. It's a given. They have to do it, and that actually is kind of a good thing. We're not debating the affordable, the benefits of the affordable housing component in every project, and the developers feel like it's fair. The community, the neighbors to these developers feel like it's fair because they know that everybody is going to have some of this wherever the development happens. So, anyway, we can talk further about that.
I'm Mike Hawkins. I'm the Managing Director of Community Outreach for the Virginia Housing Development Authority. We're the State Housing Finance Agency, and we provide loan opportunities to support rental housing, home ownership, as well as mixed-use, mixed-income developments throughout the Commonwealth. For us, community outreach is very important from the perspective of our work as a State Housing Finance Agency, interacting with localities throughout the Commonwealth and making sure that our local stakeholders and partners, including redevelopment and housing authorities, nonprofit organizations, as well as local governments and planning district commissions, understand the programs and services that we have available to really help local communities develop sustainable and inclusive neighborhoods and communities to really serve over the long term the affordable housing needs of local areas.
I'm Karen Fleck, Deputy Director with Piedmont Housing Alliance, where I work with a team of housing counselors, service providers, and affordable housing developers. And community outreach is integral to our mission. Our mission is to create housing opportunities and build community through education, lending, and development. It's also critical to our values of opportunity, community, and respect. And we find that it's really helpful to frame community outreach more as a relationship with the community that we serve. And so we learn a lot through our different mechanisms of communication. Our housing counseling clients that we serve, and we served about 700 last year. We do surveys for our points of contact with them. The residents of the 358 apartment homes that we manage, we also do an annual survey with them to get their feedback on our services and programs. But I think our most unique opportunity has been our relationship with the residents of Friendship Court. And I assume there'll be other questions later. Or
Oh, you got one. My name is Rush Otis. I work with Habitat for Humanity of Greater Charlottesville as the Director of Southwood Redevelopment. Southwood is a community of 341 homes just in the Albemarle County growth area. We purchased the park first in 2007, so about 11 years ago, and have been operating it as a mobile home park since then with the eventual goal of redevelopment. One of the first commitments we made to that community, in addition to a commitment of redevelopment without resident displacement and a fundamental increase in net affordable housing, was a commitment to an asset-based and community engagement approach to redevelopment. So what that's meant for us is that at the center of all of the decisions that we make as a developer is the voice of the community and the hopes, strengths, and aspirations that they have. We recognize that even though the infrastructure may be failing, that the community isn't, and that a lot of the strengths that exist in Southwood are because of the people that are in Southwood. And so we really see ourselves as community organizers. What it really has meant is that over the last year and a half, since January of 2017, we've been involved in a very intensive community engagement process. We've brought residents in to really be the visionaries that have direct engagement with the engineers and the architects, the designers and the land planners that are developing the master plan that will become the eventual redeveloped Southwood.
I'm Heather Hill. I'm on the Charlottesville City Council. I'm going to take a different approach because it's more of an overarching kind of theme. And now just kind of touch on what Charlotte mentioned in terms of just even the attendance as we look around this room. For me, it's in part important that we obviously are involving our community from start to finish when we are engaging in obviously a lot of topics, but namely affordable housing and how it's going to be developed in our community. We need to understand what are the barriers for why the participation isn't happening to the level that we have, and how can they be removed? And I think that's something that, as a municipality, we need to have a better understanding of. And again, it goes well beyond housing, but is it trust? Is it trust in the process that we are following? Is it trust in the folks that are engaged in that process? Is it the format? Some of us are comfortable in an environment where we're looking at PowerPoint slides and in that way, but what are the different formats and ways that we can be engaging more effectively? And I think the Habitat model obviously has been a proven success in many ways, and we need to be looking at alternative ways. And also, is it a time commitment? Some people have the ability to be able to commit the amount of time to be here right now, and a lot of folks can't, and there are other priorities in their lives. And so I just feel like it's really important as a city and as a region that we really look at the breadth of the types of engagement that we should be providing, like the opportunities for, and asking ourselves, what are those barriers to entry for the folks that we really want to have in the room and helping us come to these decisions. And so
we'll get more into that, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Annie Stupp. I believe I'm listed as a resident advocate. So I am an advocate for affordable housing in the community, and I work with numerous groups here, but I am also the grants manager for Habitat for Humanity, which, as Rush has described, does extensive community engagement. The reason that I am here listed as a resident advocate is the Coalition for Low-Income Housing, which works on behalf of citizens who are seeking housing for at less than 30% AMI, and also the Public Housing Association with residents, did not feel that their voices would be adequately represented at the Tom Tom Festival, and so chose not to participate. But as an advocate in the community and also as a professional in the affordable housing field, that's why I'm here today. So community engagement is obviously incredibly critical to any affordable housing development that we partake in. And as Heather just mentioned, there are significant barriers to community engagement that must be met. And as a fundraiser in this field, I know the incredible amount of resources, staff time, and outreach that this takes. And so I just hope that I can speak on behalf of the need to really truly commit these resources to reaching the hardest to reach populations, to serving the hardest to serve, and to breaking down the hardest barriers, and that Charlottesville should be judged by how well we do that, and that it takes incredible resources and time to do that well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Closer here. My name is Liz Chapman. I'm with Grimm & Parker Architects. And in a conversation that's really about breaking down barriers and removing stereotypes, I'm going to make some stereotypes for a minute, and I'm going to stereotype myself. I am an architect. And as a design professional, we tend to be very strong-headed type A personalities who think we know what's right for the rest of the world. And so in order to effectively engage in community outreach, it really takes a very fundamental shift in thinking from our perspective. We really need to reconsider what we bring to the table, and we need to meet residents where they are, understand their situations, and really be humble in how we're approaching community engagement, because we don't have the right answers. We don't understand people's lives, their difficulties, their struggles, unless we ask those questions and understand how the built environment that we're designing can actually change and benefit and improve lives. So it's really critical that we just step back and think about that as professionals.
I'm Andrew Gasper, Director of Planning for Albemarle County, and I want to take a slightly different spin on this. We've talked about who may not be in the room, and we may talk, what we often miss is, why are you in the room? And why is it important for us to have the dialogue between all of these things? Really stems back to, what are we trying to create? Housing doesn't exist in a vacuum. We are trying to create communities, and communities are composed of complete places with complete sets of people. Why is that important? Well, if you have a community that has, like we talked a lot about mixed use earlier in the earlier session, and in that you have to have jobs for lots of people that are in that community. You can't, if people can't live in the area where they work, they have to live someplace else. And they may be traveling a great distance, which then impacts the affordability of the transportation getting there. Why is it important to us? How do things evolve over time? We need a complete community to be able to be robust in the face of the changes and changing economies, etc. And we're all needed. So if we aren't catering to each and every one of us in a given community, our community can't last. And that is why it is so important to engage everyone, and why it's in everyone's interest to make sure that everyone is represented, everyone is engaged, and everyone is engaged in the solutions to make that happen. So I wanted to just talk about that just briefly, as opposed to just how do we reach out and how do we connect in many manners, because once we realize how all of us are needed in this equation, not all of us engage in the same way. And so there's different, where we find them, how do they participate? Just simply having a nice little doohickey that you can talk to us electronically isn't enough, because you may not have the time or the wherewithal or the understanding of why you are needed in this equation. And how do we reach out to you in a way that's meaningful to you, so that you can bring that additional need that we have to know in order for us to change how we design the community or how we plan the community. So that's all I wanted to add in this.
Thanks. I'm Grant Duffield. I'm with Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority. And I'll say, speaking to community engagement, is really out of a realization, much like I think Liz alluded to, is realization that there are a lot of challenges in everything that we do, and I don't have the damn answers. There's just no way around it. The people that have the answers are the people that I'm working with, that I serve. And the sooner we recognize that, community engagement becomes, I think, much more holistic, much more organic, hopefully more genuine. We've adopted a residents first kind of perspective at CRHA. And what we mean by that is, in everything that we do, from our policy developments, for planning for the future, how does this impact our residents, and what is the resident voice in directing these paths forward? And as we honor those components, then we can begin to develop a mission and a strategy that truly reflects what our community can ultimately support. Without it, we can build new communities, we can enact policies, and we can fail. We can own 100% of that failure. Or we can work together and we can share in the success. And that's where the genesis of engagement from CRHA.
All right, well, so our panelists. So my first question, thank you. Hopefully I don't have anything, doesn't so I think we've got a very intelligent group of folks who are sitting up here talking about some of the things or why community engagement and outreach is important to them. So So we can say lots of words to wax on about community engagement and affordable housing. What I'd like for each of you to do, and this is a two-part question. First of all, give us an example of where your community engagement, your outreach was successful. You may not have all the answers, like Grant alluded to, and so you don't have the silver bullet, but there may have been an opportunity with an event or something that made you think, aha, this is worth repeating or sharing. And then talk about an opportunity that you had that may have failed in your outreach, and what did you learn from that? So that we can share that with folks who are listening and who are here to participate, and hopefully that'll give you some questions to think about once we get to that point in this discussion.
So we've had a lot of success recently with a format that, and Heather, what you had mentioned, all the barriers. In a way, I think we kind of stumbled onto this, but we call it What's Up Boulder, and it's an open house format. But I think there are a lot of keys to it. It was hugely successful, and we're going to do it, I think, monthly or quarterly, but regularly. And so when you think about what the barriers are, coming time, right? There's going to be a meeting, it's going to be Tuesday night, and it'll be 7 to 9, and it'll be in a government conference room, and a bunch of people are going to talk at you, and there'll be a PowerPoint. and none of that is very appealing to people. And so what we're doing is, like I say, this open house format, where it is at a set time, but you can come and go as you want. The whole point is you, citizen, come up and you talk at us. You tell us what you're interested in. Instead of it being, Tuesday night will be a meeting about transportation, and Thursday night we're going to talk about affordable housing. Kind of everybody's there in the room. They've got a table and some materials. But it's essentially staff is there to talk one-on-one with people who come in and they say, you know what my big issues are? This affordable housing project going in next to my home. I have a lot of concerns about that. I want to tell you what I think. And dogs pooping in the park. Really unrelated thing. And so they come in and they go, well, I can come and go when I want. The time frame isn't set. I can come in at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. or whatever works for me. I have the parks people over there, I can go talk to them about that issue which is bothering me. And I can talk to you about affordable housing, and then we package it all up and we give it to our council as feedback from the community. And we were really kind of shocked at how successful it was. And a couple of key things were, it's not in a governmental building, we do it in a pretty friendly place. That's kind of a nice place to go to. We make it very family and kid friendly, so there's things there for kids to do, so you don't have to worry about, can I bring my kids to this thing? Are they going to be bored and interrupting a meeting? There's no experts at the front of the room, which really puts people off. And they don't want to be talked at. They want to tell you what they think. And so, like I say, we're going to repeat it because it was really kind of spectacularly successful. We had huge turnouts from people, and it worked. And so we're really happy about that. So What's Up Boulder? As far as something that didn't work, that's a good question. I guess I would say, it's sort of the opposite. We have a meeting and we say we're going to talk about affordable housing, and it's going to be 7 to 9, and it will be in this governmental room, and nobody shows up. It just doesn't. It's not very appealing, and I think that primarily they don't think that what they are thinking and their concerns are going to be heard. I think you have people that leave that kind of meeting and say, I didn't get to ask my question. And I didn't get to voice my concern, which was different maybe than what the topic of the meeting was, but related. So anyway, those are a couple of thoughts that I have.
I'm going to talk about our efforts at Virginia Housing Development Authority to really address issues associated with Not in My Backyard, the NIMBY issue that we continue to face in terms of trying to promote affordable housing in the context of strong, vibrant, sustainable communities. About 13 years ago, VHDA really set out on a course in terms of being much more engaged from a community outreach perspective. One of the first things that we did was work with the Virginia Statewide Neighborhood Conference, because we thought it was very important to get out before neighborhood leaders to help them understand the importance of housing in the context of their neighborhoods, particularly the value of rental housing and an array of rental housing, particularly affordable rental housing in the context of neighborhoods. And of course, oftentimes it's the single-family home ownership neighborhoods that can be somewhat anxious when it comes to issues associated with affordable rental housing. So that was certainly a successful effort. We continue to sponsor their annual conference. We're there with a display table. We sponsor various panels over the years with the idea of, again, introducing neighborhood leaders to the concepts associated with affordable housing and why that's very important to both existing neighborhoods as well as neighborhoods undergoing revitalization. As part of that, we developed essentially a training session that we entitled The Challenges of Community Design. And it's quite interesting that we developed several elements associated with this. It was essentially a visual preference survey that projects a number of different images up on the screen. The participants are able to choose which visual image they like the best. And at the end of that exercise, they use the images that were chosen as the elements for designing their own community. And they're broken up into groups. They have an opportunity to interact with one another and look at, okay, where should home ownership be? Where should rental be? Where should mixed use, mixed income be? What about the public facilities? What about the street layout? All of these aspects that ultimately come together to make a strong community. And it's amazing the dialogue that occurs among those groups. We've been able to present that to professional planning organizations. We've presented it to the Virginia Statewide Neighborhood Conference, grant to Virginia Association of Housing and Community Development officials or public housing officials. And I would say that's been very successful. We've also used that as part of guest lectures and guest presentations at universities, including the UVA planning program, and been very well received by students. Very low tech, but very hands-on, very engaged, and it really encourages the dialogue among the participants around the table. So we consider that to be very successful from the standpoint of designing that particular training session and providing it at various conferences and as part of our outreach activities. Now what's interesting, if you would like for me to turn and talk about something that's not as successful as we would like to be, I would say it's the same initiative because we've not had the ability to really scale that up. We've not had the ability to essentially step back and look at that training and determine, can we in fact design this in such a way that it could be broadcast out on a broader basis in terms of having perhaps train the trainer sessions so that each community, each region would be able to deliver this type of training, because we found that it's been very, very popular. It's been an opportunity for residents and participants to engage one another in really meaningful dialogues about their aspirations for their communities, bring in perspectives from the neighborhoods they grew up in, how that impacts what decisions that they propose as part of the community planning process. So I think it's a great opportunity, but it's one we need to look at. Is there an opportunity to scale that up and utilize our network of local partners to help deliver that throughout the Commonwealth? Because I believe at the end of the day that does help in terms of the dialogue around the table and really bringing aspirations and visions together, and also understanding the challenges inherent in trying to manage all of these issues as you're designing a community or you're working to revitalize and empower a community.
So in the context of community outreach as a highly valued relationship, I'm kind of thinking of successes in terms of being able to directly and transparently communicate, but also have that engagement role of input and feedback. And I think one of the biggest successes that we've had is an idea that we got from a neighborhood-based organization in New Orleans, and I think it's been most effective for our work at Friendship Court, and that's been the election of the Friendship Court Advisory Committee. which has 9 resident members who have been leaders over the past 2.5 years. And so I think in that sense, having a leadership role in designing the community outreach has been really important and effective for us. Having residents discuss how they and their neighbors would most like to receive information and then give feedback. So that's a big success. I would say the other success is the realization that there is no one best approach. So we did had a variety of community events and dinners and celebrations, and at one of them this past fall, we asked people to tell us what their preferred method of communication for getting information and updates about programs happening at the community center and things that are going on with the redevelopment or the work of the advisory committee. And then we also asked the question how they most prefer providing feedback and sharing ideas. And what we found was that it was yes to really everything. So newsletters, community dinners, small focus groups, door-to-door outreach, emails, anonymous surveys, visiting with our community organizer. All of these play an important role, but I do think the ones that stand out, and back to relationships, the ones that stand out are the opportunities for people to be engaged and in dialogue with their neighbors. So for us, there was most positive comments about community dinners and community events. In terms of failures, I think I'd have to say, events that you plan where you would like to have more people there to provide input, but you really can only count that as a success because it's learning. And back to what several people have said about a lot of us are time poor, and some of us have even greater barriers than others, along with the challenge of time. So recognizing that people's time is valuable, and while we may want to get or extract information or something very specific from people, at the same time, we really have to understand that it's a two-way relationship, and so to the extent that we can focus on giving value back and forth in a two-way relationship, I think that will be best served.
I'll take mine.
These are passing, they're multiplying.
So I've had the fortune of working with Habitat since 2010. So it's been about 8 years. I've worked in the Southwood community almost that entire time, which has been really incredible. I've grown a lot with the organization and really been able to see firsthand a lot of the evolution in our approach as an organization to community engagement and community organizing. And so when I first started, there had been a grant that a local school had gotten, and they reached out to us and they had this money and they wanted to do something really good. And we wanted to do something really good. And we decided that people really needed access to fresh food. And so doesn't everyone love gardens? And a community garden would be a really great idea. And so we got the grant funding and we got the school together and we built a community garden. And that was built right around the same time that I started. And then for the next 3 years, every summer I spent a lot of time trying to get people to use the community garden. And every summer it would have a little bit of energy at the beginning, or different people would come out and we'd get different organizations interested and excited, and it would really peter out. And we just were really banging our heads against a wall, wondering why no one was taking advantage of this amazing resource we had brought to the community. And what we've really learned from that time to what we're doing today is that anytime you bring that outside in sort of approach, and that you're deciding for a community what's going to serve them best without asking, without taking a listening approach, that initiative is likely to fail. And that's not a failing of the community, but it's really a failing on the organization not to listen. So there was another time about halfway in, so I'm getting better, but I'm still not that good, where we had been having these series of monthly community meetings, and attendance would peter out, but people would come, and we couldn't quite put our finger on what was going on. We'd tried different incentive programs, and we'd tried all sorts of different mechanisms. We consulted with a lot of different people about how we could increase our attendance to get more resident participation. And so finally we decided, we're going to have a dinner. We're going to invite all the community members that have come to these meetings over time, and we're just going to sit down and talk about what should we cover in these meetings, because what we're covering in these meetings obviously isn't interesting to folks. So I was really excited because I'd learned some things about being more appreciative and being more, taking a listening approach. And so I was ready to take all of the notes about what meeting topics we should cover over the coming months. And what happened in that meeting was that a lot of folks community members came out, and what they told me was they didn't want to have meetings anymore. They wanted to do work in their community. And so that was just another moment where I was like, oh, I have a lot of assumptions about what I think is going to work or what is good or what I've experienced that are incorrect, and that it's really hard to know what your assumptions are until you get in there and start talking to people. But some of the work that we've been doing in the most recent, year and a half has been the most exciting at Southwood. One, I think it's really exciting because what has been in process for a very long time, but has been intangible for a very long time, the process of redevelopment is finally starting to feel real to folks. It's finally, we're in an entitlements process. We've submitted a rezoning document to the county. Things are really, there's a lot of visual representation of all of the energy and work that's been going on. And so we've had this incredibly devoted, committed group of community members that have been coming out to a series of meetings. They've given over 1,000 hours just to developing the master plan in conjunction with our architects and planners. And it's been really amazing to watch that shift from really not being able to get folks to necessarily come to the table, to recognizing that if you're talking to them about things they want to talk about, and that if you're genuinely putting them in that leadership role, I think we've already talked about that empowerment piece, that people come to the table, and they come to the table willingly and with an excitement. We've offered a couple of times to take breaks. We basically meet every Thursday night for about 2 hours, and we've given them some opportunities for pause in the curriculum, and usually they don't take us up on it. They'd like to keep going. So just listening to folks, putting them in the position of decision-making, empowerment, direct conversation with decision makers, and removing the barriers so that it's something that they can actually make it to.
I'll be brief because I think certainly I would just echo a lot of the things that have been said, but for me, the word dialogue has come up a lot. I think that anytime there's a format in which there's not, the ability to have a two-way dialogue. But I'd even take it a step further. I think it goes as far as really relationship building. For me, a lot of my experiences are based on the last year of my life where I wasn't in elected office, but I was running for elected office. And I certainly came in with motivations as to why I wanted to pursue that next step. But I really became committed to really wanting to be in that community and to going out into the community and asking anyone to continue just to be at people's doorsteps, or also at their places, the nonprofits, their places of work, just to really understand and hear from one where they're coming and have that dialogue. Because so often I feel like in many of our city meetings, if I'm being honest, it is a one-way. And sometimes that one-way is coming from the audience to, for example, council. And we just, if you just added a procedure where we're going to give extra time, that will give us a chance to respond immediately because people feel like they're talking to a wall. And I feel that way where we failed is I think about our town hall meetings traditionally. We go out into the neighborhoods, we feel like we're coming to you. And as a neighborhood leader, I can tell you I have many neighbors that would just say, I'm not going to these meetings anymore because we just say what we want to say. Everyone's just kind of deadpan listening, and they say there's one follow-up, and there usually is one follow-up, but there's nowhere that this is tracked, and there's no continuity for any action to take place. That's really frustrating. It's demotivating for people to ever want to be involved. And so for me, I just think we have to, every time we are looking to engage with the community, we need to make sure that we're creating that meaningful dialogue. We're going to the places where the community is and really spend more of our time listening than we are speaking. and really recognizing that that relationship building is what is going to make all of these initiatives successful, is that we get to know each other and we're working together towards a common goal. And so it's kind of like a foundational kind of perspective that I feel like I've picked up.
So I haven't been at Habitat nearly as long as Rush. I've only been there for about a year, so I can't speak personally to some of the successes. But I can say there's one program in particular that is very very poignant to me when I've gone to observe it. And I do take a kind of a backseat role since I'm in a more communications and fundraising position. But this program is Community Conversations. And because Habitat builds mixed income communities and brings together a lot of different families from a lot of different cultural backgrounds, some have been in this country for only a few years, others, their families have been in the area for generations. You're really bridging a lot of different cultures, and you're also bridging socioeconomic statuses within these mixed income communities. Sometimes we're building homes in areas where people already have lived there for a long time, and there is a lot of NIMBYism. And this as an affordable housing developer, you guys are in this room because you really understand a bit about NIMBYism. As Mike mentioned. So Community Conversations is a program where once a month families, Habitat families meet with their neighbors and in the Habitat community, as well as with neighbors who already live in the community, to come together to share meals, very similar to what some of the other panelists have been talking about, to really do that relationship building and trust building, envisioning for their community. What do they want this community to look like? What do they want for their children? And regardless of cultural differences, by and large, people want the same things. Regardless of economic differences, everyone wants what is best for their children. They want safe, stable neighborhoods. They want good schools. They want good homes. So this program is really about kind of valuing the perspectives of all of these different families, but it's even more so about fighting the stigma of affordable housing, or what people think of as low-income housing. There's so much stigma that goes into that, and one of the Community Conversations programs that's happening right now, we're in month 3 or 4. They probably won't move into their homes for it'll be a while. But at another community in Crozet, and I really see this as the onus being on the people in the neighborhood. To welcome the Habitat families in and to say, yes, we want you here. No, NIMBYism is not okay. And yes, we see the inherent value of having your presence in this neighborhood. The HOA welcomed them in. They had a community picnic. They offered their support. They offered information and advice about the school system. But that was on them. That was not on the Habitat families. To say, yes, we're going to be good neighbors, we're going to be really great. It was on the community members who already lived there to say that this is something that we value, and we inherently value you as people because we all want the same things for our communities. And I think I can't really speak to failures again for this particular organization. I've only been there a year, but I think when failures do happen when we are not valuing all members of the community equally, when we're valuing some over others and saying that no, your input doesn't have as much weight, or we're not willing to put in the time and put in the resources and to relationship building. And as a fundraiser, I see this all the time. A lot of funders maybe don't want to fund staff time. They don't understand that this takes a lot of staff time. This takes a lot of intensive, as Rush mentioned, meetings, meals, childcare, transportation, breaking down all of those barriers. That takes money, and but it takes trust, and it takes time to build that trust. And so, having elected officials, having funders, having market developers, and others in the community who actually value that this is not just about impact and numbers. But it's about laying the foundation for a more equitable community and about healing wounds, especially in a place like Charlottesville.
So before I speak to your specific question, I feel like we would be remiss if we could take a moment to consider that 50 years ago yesterday, the Fair Housing Act was signed into law. And think about that for a minute. 7 days after Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. The Fair Housing Act was signed into law. And while we have certainly made great progress in promoting fair, just, safe, affordable housing for everyone, there is so much further to go. We have so much more work to do, and I'm just really excited that we're all here talking about this subject today. So, to your specific questions. So I've been extremely fortunate that over the years, the particular clients that I've been able to work with really value the communities that they work in. And Piedmont in particular really values the opinions of residents. They seek them out, and it's truly been a blessing for me to be able to engage on a very personal level with residents. And in my case, because Piedmont's properties are right here in the heart of Charlottesville, it gives me the opportunity to informally interact with those residents as well. I run into them on the street. We're friends now. We get to break down those barriers, and they no longer see me as a scary, strange, frightening person standing at the front of the room dictating to them. We're just friends. We're just moms trying to figure out how to raise our kids together in the same community. And so really being allowed to come to those meetings, really get to talk to people on a one-on-one basis, and make what I do as an architect to seem demystified and just another job that another person is doing. It's really important in allowing residents to feel like they can just talk to me about what it is they need in order to make their community better, and in order to make their day-to-day lives better through the built environment. So some failures that I want to specifically point out are when we don't understand residents' schedules. It's a simple thing, but so many of the residents at Friendship Court are shift workers. And what that means is their shifts are starting early in the evening. So those evening meetings are actually the hardest ones for them to get to. So it's really important that we think about that critically. We're coming at it from a perspective of most of us are working 9-to-5 jobs. If you're going on at 7 p.m., you can't come to a meeting that starts at 5 or 6 o'clock. So just really taking the time to think critically about who is it that you want to talk to? When do they work? When are they actually available? And when can they get childcare in order to come talk to you? And so just taking the time to think about those really little things makes all the difference.
Well, a lot of our flaming failures and great successes are very similar, so I'm trying to talk about something a little different. How many of you in the room are interested in affordable housing? Raise a hand. How many of you personally feel that you are responsible for the affordable housing problem? Okay. Is that really, or are you just kind of like self-berating and you flagellate yourself at home when you go, all right? So I think one of the things that it's not always the ones that you get in the room, it's the ones you don't get in the room. And the thing that I think is really important for us to consider is the approach to getting the answers. And so, one of the big failures is, hi, we're the government, we're here to help you. Right? Now, you probably don't get a whole lot of people at that particular audience. The other way to really get a lot of people in the audience might be, we are going to destroy your lives now. You get a lot of people in the room then, but is that a really constructive environment? So one of the things that I've learned is making sure that, because of the many failures I've had, it is understanding what can the public answer well in something that's meaningful. How do we engage them in a way they want to be engaged with questions that they can answer? And so actually my staff comes up with some really great ideas. So having the same kinds of feedback, you're gonna get the same kinds of people. But sometimes you can get different feedback. And one of my staff, for instance, is converting a lot of our engagement with the public into gamification, turning it into a game. Because that way if you hone that to answers that you really want, you really get a good return in terms of how you get that meaningful dialogue that Mike was talking about, or that many have talked about. So are we asking the right questions? Are we doing things that people really, that resonate with them and that they feel like they can answer as to what they can do and what they can ask for? And is there an ability for us to get information and ways to address? Sometimes the answers are actually simpler than solving the entire affordable housing problem. You might be able to solve some small things like, hey, gee, we've got some very low-hanging fruit here that we can do right now, as opposed to waiting for some grandiose thing. But you gotta be able to connect with the right people in the right place. Sometimes it's just the NIMBYs, not saying no. Sometimes it's getting somebody who represents somebody who's not being heard, a group there at that time in a way that they can participate. So somebody who, yeah, we were ones who located. I'll take the example of, oh, we don't want those people here who ride the bus to we just don't want those in our neighborhood. I'm someone who rides the bus. You don't want me here? And that just gives them pause, because they don't necessarily, the stigmas that are associated with all of this stuff, that person's not so good, but that one's okay. You can't do that right in front of somebody. Because when you start meeting these people and engaging them in a meaningful way, they start realizing that we are all together in the solution. And that's where the solutions come from. It's not going to come from some government solution. We don't have the solution. We can contribute, but we're only a piece. And so I think that's one of the fundamental failings that we have, is that we think that we can solve this either in our little box, or that it's the people who already are in this room. It's actually, how do we engage everybody in that path to the whole solution? It's not going to come from just a part of us. So it's not just about getting the bodies, it's about getting the right people answering the right questions. And that's a very difficult thing to do.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to add a whole lot to what's already been said. I'll say that my position has benefited by some tremendous educators and people who teach me routinely, and that's my residents. I think one of the successes, Charlene, that CRHA could point to, and public housing community can point to, is the leadership that Public Housing Association residents has provided around crafting a positive vision for redevelopment. I think the work that FAR does in conjunction with legal aid helps truly reach residents in the place where they are, and are best able to solicit input, feedback, and meaningful, valuable data that you can work from. I think the key is engagement is best, that works best is engagement that truly addresses the values or concerns of the community and that produces tangible results. That's what feeds success. FAR has just developed a supermodel for being able to do that. Part of my education is realizing that that's a channel I need to work through when I'm looking for engagement opportunities with my community. I may not be the very best one to do that. There's others out there who can.
Well, thank you all for those responses. There are a lot of questions going through my mind in terms of, again, addressing the issue of the folks who aren't in this room. One of the things that I would like for you all to think about, and if you could insert this in a response before I send it out to the audience to ask for questions, so what would be your appeal to the folks who aren't in this room? For the folks who, the whole reason you sit up here and you do your job in housing, what would be your appeal to get folks in this room or in any space if we were to move it to their neighborhood or in their community? And so thinking about that and how that might be a part of either your closing or I want to throw it out since we have about 14 minutes left to folks in the audience. Are there any specific questions for any of our panelists based on what you've heard or your just thoughts about community outreach and affordable housing? Yes.
I is just an interested citizen here in Charlottesville, and I guess one of the things I feel is a missed opportunity to sort of is to minimize NIMBYism. Is I live in a building across the street from Friendship Court, and I'm just struck by the fact that most of the people, people bought in a building across from Section 8. They don't have a problem with Section 8 or whatever, but there's been almost no engagement of just bringing people up to speed, the excitement of, the plans of what's going on. I happen to subscribe to the newsletter, but it's sort of like, I feel like there's no community, it would be nice to have a community dinner.
If I can, there is one planned. The reason we haven't reached out to the community yet is because we don't feel like we have a full buy-in from the entire community, and PHA is currently in the process of going door to door to every single resident. So they don't want to reach out to the rest of the greater Charlottesville community until they really feel strongly that they have that buy-in from all of their residents.
I understand that, but it wouldn't hurt just to even know sort of what the plans are. Not even saying definitively, just saying this is sort of the agenda coming to the future, and we expect maybe we'll be ready to start construction or designs going on.
There are definite plans for several community dinners this summer.
Thank you.
And I think really speaking to your point, Charlene, if there's one thing that I could say to the folks who aren't here, and to the folks that are here, it's relationships tough, and it takes commitment on everyone's part. And I know the folks that I work with, I serve, are extremely committed to seeing positive redevelopment, positive things in their communities. I don't take much advice from attorneys, but one attorney that I worked with is to say, look, when people stop talking, good things don't happen. We've got to stay in relationship. We've got to stay in communication, and it's up to us to both everyone to figure out how best to do that.
So I'm going to represent the people that you're not seeing in this room. So these would be the people that have been to Habitat, that have been to rural development, that have been to PHA. I think that all the home buying programs here don't have an aftercare plan. So people either get denied a Habitat, they say, hey, you made too much money. These are single women with a family of 3 or 4 kids that are being denied. Oh, your car value is too much, we're going to deny you.
Right.
PHA, well, you don't make enough money. USDA, rural development, well, your debt to income ratio. So here we have 3 home buying programs offered in this city, right? So you're either leaving out the middle class or you're overqualifying the middle class. So I feel like we don't have enough options. So what are we gonna do because I'm one of those people that the young lady, Rush was saying, I'm over the conversations, right? I'm over people making decisions with funding that they have never even walked in our shoes as single parents. See, you don't know our struggles as single parents. So you can't get money and say, this is what we need to do. The flower garden or the garden, great idea, a waste of money, right? For years. Maybe they're using it now, but we need to have way more aftercare plans for individuals. Okay, maybe you don't qualify for USDA Rural Development Home Loan right now. Let's get you to where you need to be.
Right.
It's other options, like the down payment assistance. Take that money and let people pay their debt off.
Right.
Let them prepare to be homeowners. We have to push people to be homeowners because it's unfair for people like Grant, that's at CH Charlottesville Housing Redevelopment,
Right.
where we're fussing at them. Why has Hardy Drive not been redeveloped? Why are we not pushing people from Hardy Drive to be homeowners? It's so many avenues we can take. We cannot keep having these conversations. This has been a conversation for the last 100 years of this city. I'm 36 years old. My grandmother is almost 80 years old. My grandmother says she will die and never see change in the city. That's unfortunate. We have to stop talking. We really do. We have to stop talking and we have to start doing. And that wasn't really a question. I just wanted to represent the people that couldn't take off work like me to be here to speak up for the people that can't afford it.
Thank you, Tanisha. Any other questions or comments from the audience or anybody want to respond?
I just want to thank you very much for your comment. I think that's really important. And while we have enjoyed working with a lot of home buyers at Piedmont Housing Alliance, we know that there's always so many more people that we can reach. Many of the down payment assistance programs that we work with come from federal, state, or local government funding with very specific parameters. And so that's a restriction that we have to work with. But I think we have an opportunity to attract other, more flexible sources of funding. And one that we've had some success with recently is the Individual Development Account program, which is out of the Department of Housing and Community Development, where savings can be used towards education, starting or expanding a business, or homeownership. And there may be a way that we can attract some more flexible funding that doesn't have as many restrictions as the other down payment assistance types of programs. So I'd actually be really interested in interviewing you to get your feedback so that I can suggest that to some of our funders.
Anyone else?
I was disappointed about the Kumbaya comment at the beginning because we need voices, and I didn't mean about that particular song, but hearing voices come out, you know, people assume there's nobody in the room here who's living in these places. I live in one of these homes. It's not a home I own. I paid the full price over in the Carlton Avenue apartments. It's $880 a month, including my rented washing machine situation. And I earn less than $11 an hour full-time at Kroger, and the only reason I'm here today, they would not let me get time off from my shifts. But I was abused at work all week, and I was told to leave. Thankfully, I could be here today. But this wage worker, shift work issue does keep people from engaging in their communities, and it is the biggest problem, I think. And it is not housing, it is abuse at work is a humongous problem. It's from corporate level power. It's not local problem. One more thing. I'm sorry for shouting, but you gave me enough energy to speak. Thank you. I would like to be writing a set of songs that would include choruses that would address local problems that could unify people in voices and singing, something I'm able to do that maybe no one else in Charlottesville could do quite like I can. And I would like to talk to some people who would be interested in helping me know what content could be in those songs, or who I should go to start working on that project. I also really like this games idea. This is hands-on stuff. This is working on a thing with your people next to you, shoulder to shoulder at a table or out in the grass somewhere, shouting or playing or making up things with your imagination. Anything from board games to sack races. Get people involved. The Easter egg hunts we had recently in Charlottesville bring neighborhoods together, and these conversations happen naturally in those settings.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, why don't we start from Grant and go this way and just make a really 20-second closing comment.
And I'm gonna try and put back on you, Charlene, a little bit. I'd love to hear some of your perspectives on engagement as well, just from, this is what you do, but I don't know if you can do that in 20 seconds.
I can.
20 seconds. Again, the residents we serve have the answers to the challenges that we're trying to reach. And you just have to stay in relationship and committed to that, even when it's difficult.
Oh, sure, now we get to go first where it's easy, and then it's, not all the tough questions and everybody answers them. I would say that the one thing that we can in this room do is we all know people, and connecting with them and engaging them is one of the strongest things that we can do as people, is that reach out. And how do we engage with our neighbors, and how do we engage with people we know for the solution is really what built our communities in the first place, and it's our solution to community issues like affordable housing.
Coming up May 1st through 8th is the National Housing Week of Action, and I would encourage you all to reach out to ourhomesourvoices.org for more information about that. Everyone is just really encouraged to lobby their legislators and push for more affordable housing.
So I think I said before that Charlottesville should be judged by how well we engage the hardest to reach citizens. I stand by that. I think that the most difficult to serve populations, the lowest income families, our most vulnerable neighbors should be our number one priority. We should be producing as much housing as we can for very low income citizens. We always need to keep race at the forefront. That is such a broad issue in Charlottesville, and we need to make amends for the past year. And we need to do that in a community driven way that really listens. And that's it. Thank you.
I guess I'll echo a little bit because the thought that came to my mind was we're thinking we have 20 seconds here, but really just ask each of you to go somewhere in this community that you've never been before and get to know people there. It was an experience for me that honestly was the most enriching part of going through that over the last year, and if it even had been not the outcome at the end, I feel like I've certainly gotten to know this community in a new way, and I just think that it's just really opened your minds to realize just there is so much that we do have in common just as human beings. I think that these barriers that we put up, whether they're figurative or real, are just what we have to overcome to really bring this community together. So just to really challenge each of us to kind of have the opportunity. And Charlene and I shared a session where a group of us came together, and largely I didn't know a lot of people in the room. Our friend Clarence Green pulled it together, and we were together for 2.5 hours, and there were people in the room that I know that I was actually even uncomfortable because there had been past histories with. But I walked out of that just so inspired about the importance of sometimes just those one-on-one connections and just the wave effect that can have once you kind of take that one-on-one, you invite more people to the table the next time, and that's something that we're continuing to have. It's so fundamental, but that direct connection with people and humans and getting to know each other is so important and foundational to our success as a community.
I'll just close thinking about trust is something that is so hard won and so easily broken. And so as an organization, we have done things in the past that have not reached out enough to the people in our community. And the biggest thing that we can do is recognize that we're not just a service provider with a program that's unchangeable and immutable, but that we have the opportunity to listen to the people in our community who aren't being served and who and evolve and change over time and take new models and new approaches. And that's so important and crucial to our ability to actually affect change in the community.
I think my final thought is just about the importance of the experiential community engagement, and picking up on your comment about the open houses. Open house we had with stations where people really got to kind of experience and dialogue. The bus tour that Grimm and Parker organized that included residents, the Friendship Court getting to talk with other residents up in DC and Northern Virginia, and then the times that we have been at your offices, Liz, and actually working on maps and placing building forms and drawing roads and parks, and seeing the expertise of the residents about their own community come out.
I would just like to mention that recently the Governor's Housing Policy Advisory Council released a study on the impact of housing for Virginia's economy. And it outlines a number of key issues related to the importance of affordable housing in terms of advancing economic opportunities in communities throughout the Commonwealth. I do actually have an infographic card that also links to that study, but I think that particular study can be very useful as everyone's looking towards generating community-wide support for projects, which is referenced as part of the narrative for this particular session, the idea that you'd be able to point to the continued need for affordable housing and how Virginia needs to address that issue in order to be successful in the future. And I would just close saying that I think the future is really the key element that we need to emphasize as part of our outreach to communities, that it's not about the here and now, it's not about the residents, and that's very important, the current residents, I'm not diminishing that, but emphasizing the future, because oftentimes that emphasis on the future can help bring further dialogue and bring those households to the table.
So I just want to finish up by saying that when it comes to community engagement, I think it's really important to understand that the area we work in is very specialized. Recently, one of my sons, I have 2 sons, ended up, he was just picking me up and he stayed at a meeting for a little while. And he walked up and said, "Sweetie, I speak a different language. I mean, what are you talking about?" And it, really made me think. And that just remember that everybody doesn't speak affordable housing or government or planning. And so when you're trying to engage with the community, talk like normal people and try not to use buzzwords. And so to end, I want to say this, that I think, Andy, you said it, which is affordable housing is, there's a stigma even around the term. So I'm on a mission to change the term affordable housing to cheap housing for cool people. It's a bumper sticker. April 25th, this is Fair Housing Month, so April 25th at 6 p.m. in City Council Chambers, the Office of Human Rights in partnership with PHA and the Fair Housing Office out of Richmond is doing a tenants' rights session, 6 o'clock. If you can't be there, it will be televised. And so if you don't know what your rights are as a tenant, I encourage you to encourage other folks to be there or to watch that session. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to give Greg the mic.
So I want to share a success. We have had the 3 different groups that passionately care about serving our citizens. We've had over 50 of you volunteer to spend 3 days in dialogue. I think that's a great success. The failure is that because of my insensitivity to the particular venue that was offered for us to do this, the people we're serving, hopefully some of you aren't here. With that said, these are all being recorded. We're all available to be one-on-one. I can say that we tried very hard, including a lot of people in that community, to find a way to bridge this situation to participate. And for those of you that did, I thank you very much. And we will improve our community engagement as we all passionately deal with trying to create more affordable housing in our community. With that said, we have 3 very powerful programs again tomorrow. We're going to meet 3 developers that have designed great projects, some of the citizens have been able to see. And they've done it in very different ways, and I think all of the ways that it's been done can work here. Then we're going to have a discussion about design of home, neighborhood, and costs, because you can't design affordably without using a lot of other tools. So we're going to sort of educational thing there, and then we're going to end with the needs assessment, using what's going on with the city's need assessment now and where we can broaden that and what the next steps are once we define the problem. So thank you all for participating, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. And don't forget, Saturday we're going to wrap it up with talking about what lessons we've learned and how we can apply it to solving our problems here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Hold on.
Maybe you have some suggestions.
Thank
you so much.
What is
I do think we got the tough end of the table there, you know, we had that kind of scramble at the end there, and I know it's different to say.